One of the biggest misunderstandings in modern day Christianity isn't about who Jesus followed, but who he is. And it's something that needs to be said and something that needs to be looked at even closer. Not on our own understanding, but leaning and understanding and acknowledging God. On today, on Kingdom Thoughts, we're going to dive in on the claim, is Jesus God? Welcome to Kingdom Thoughts. Today we're looking at, once again, the claim of, is Jesus God? And this is actually a modern day conundrum, a modern day argument. If we look at actual ancient text, ancient findings that we found in archaeology and all that, this claim was never something fought. It wasn't anything that people would argue about until much later. And many people read through the Bible with a modern day lens, and they miss something about the ancient things that believers understood and what they would understand almost immediately just by language. Jesus didn't need to walk around saying, "I am God." In English. He didn't need to say that in English for people to know exactly what he was saying in his claims, because in ancient times, people understood the language. They understood what he was saying when he'd say things. They also understood that names weren't just labels. They were identity. And let's actually look into that. And I'm going to have some notes here, so forgive me if I'm looking down, because this is actually very important. We don't want to lean on our own understanding. We want to acknowledge God as the word tells us to. And the other thing is, we don't want to deny God's power by bringing him back to what only we can fathom or understand, by saying, well, God doesn't, God can't, God don't. God has done some very amazing things for the sake of his people, for the sake of his creation. And one thing I want to bring up is names. Names in ancient times were identity. They weren't something that got our attention when somebody said it. They weren't like a convenience, like, my name's Scott. And how do I know when people are talking to me? Well, because they named Scott. What does my name mean? Nothing really. It's just, hey, that guy's Scott. Back then, it wasn't that way. Names meant something, which is why you go through different cultures and different languages. When they translated somebody's name, they didn't translate it through pronunciation. They translated it through meaning, so people would know who this man was. And names were something extremely important. They carried a description of who someone was, what they did, what they carried, and sometimes even what they were called to do. We see this in Genesis 17:5, Genesis 32:28, and Matthew 16:28. That's why when the angel told Joseph in Matthew chapter 1:23, he said, his name shall be Emmanuel. And interesting how they didn't call him Emmanuel when he was born. They called him Jesus. But what does Emmanuel mean? The angel wasn't saying, hey, this is his name. This is saying, this is who he is. And what does Emmanuel mean? God with us. It wasn't saying make sure everyone calls him this. It was saying this is who he is. God with us. And Emmanuel means God with us. We see that all the way back in Isaiah 7:14. So when the angel spoke this to Joseph about his son Jesus, we understand immediately, at least Joseph understood immediately, the importance of the child that Mary was carrying. It's not just human. It's God with us. And the other important thing is, as we look through the ancient language of what even Isaiah says, Emmanuel is not God near us, not God helping us, but it is God with us. This is important because it wasn't saying something different. The words were saying exactly what they were meant to portray. It wasn't symbolic language. This is identity language. This is why he wasn't named Emmanuel. This is what the angel was telling Joseph. This child is God with us. And he's saying it, this is God with us, God with us. And here's some proof about how names are so much more important. Just this little factor. There's so much more to prove this, but this is just another angle to look at. Um, Remember Zechariah and the father of John the Baptist. We see clearly John the Baptist in Luke chapter 1, 57 through 63. When Elizabeth gave birth, the people were shocked that she wanted to name him John. And why was that? Because they assumed his name would be something after his father, tied to his father, tied to his lineage. John was saying something completely different. In fact, let me look it up. John, I want to make sure I get it right. So, John meant God is gracious, or Yahweh is merciful. And he was John the Baptist. God is merciful, the Baptist. He was coming to set something up in his name, period. And that's why they were surprised, because they were expecting the child's lineage to be to Zechariah, to be to the priesthood and that role, as that was what was expected. They also, why this shows why names were changed in scripture, because identity was changed. Simon became Peter. God changed his name. Saul became Paul. God changed his name, because you're no longer this. You are now this. And Jacob became Israel. Jacob became Israel because God changed his identity. Jacob, as known as the trickster, became the one who wrestles with God. A name change meant a calling shift. It's not a nickname, like somebody will call me Scotty or whatever, Scott, or by my middle name. It's always not just what you call them, it is who they are. Like Scott, I'm a pastor. My name would have been something like Pastor, Scott the Pastor, something like that. Name change meant calling shift, not nickname. And God interpreted tradition through this, and it's John's identity wasn't inherited, it was assigned. That's why John the Baptist, his name was assigned at birth. The angels told them, in fact, Zechariah wasn't even allowed to speak until his name was made John, relinquishing the right that his father had, giving him to the new role that God had for John the Baptist. But God interpreted tradition because John's identity wasn't inherited. It was assigned by heaven. That's Luke chapter 1, verse 13 that talks about this. And in the same way, Jesus wasn't named to reflect Joseph or Mary. Yes, it was Yeshua bar Joseph, which meant son of Joseph. But as the angels told Joseph, he shall be Emmanuel. He was named to reveal God himself. Even the name Yeshua means God is salvation. So you got John the Baptist, who paved the way, who God is merciful, God is gracious, to God is salvation. Names tell the story of what actually happened as well. And the name Emmanuel wasn't, we already talked about that. So next, we got to understand this too, that the Messiah was always prophesied as God with us, as we saw in Isaiah, God with us. This wasn't a New Testament invention. This was something that Isaiah declared plainly, very obviously. Isaiah 7:14, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He's not saying, hey, name this child Emmanuel, because that's what people are gonna say when they want to get his attention. No, this is his identity is God with us. His identity is God with us. And then again, we see it even clearer in Isaiah 9:6, where it says, for unto us a child is born, as his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This is the Son. They're calling who the Messiah will be right here. It will be a son, and his names will be Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Both the Father, the Son, and the Spirit right there. It's right there in the Old Testament of the prophecy of who Jesus would be. Ancient Israel knew exactly what the claim of Messiah was. They also knew what mighty God meant. They weren't confused by this language. They knew this Messiah was going to be this. But we seem to be confused with it now. We seem to understand. The prophets weren't saying this Messiah would. The prophets weren't saying the Messiah would represent God. They were saying he would be God among us. He would be among his people, God among his people, which makes the sacrifice he made so much bigger than we understand. And the ancient Hebrews already understood that God could be present in more than one place. And you don't believe me? Okay, fine. That's great. Ancient Hebrews understood that God could dwell in more than one place very easily because they had the Ark of the Covenant, which enthroned the dwelling, what's called the dwelling place of God. His spirit was in there. His spirit moved along with them. It was very obvious his spirit was in there. We see that in Exodus 25:22 and 1 Samuel 4:4. Yet, they also knew that God was enthroned in heaven. And that's Psalms 11:4, the same Psalms written as the Ark of the Covenant was still there. David understood this deeply. When the Ark was captured by enemy forces, David still prayed. He didn't go to the Ark and pray. He didn't say, well, the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence is away. No, he understood that when he prayed, it reached heaven. He knew God wasn't trapped in the object's location. His spirit dwelled there, but God was still enthroned. 1 Samuel 21:22 talks about this. Especially where Paul says, where can I go? Where David says, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? That's Psalms 139:7. They understood God is everywhere. God's presence was in the Ark of the Covenant. God's presence was everywhere as well. There's no limitation on what God can do, especially in his own creation. David didn't see a contradiction at all. Modern thinking sees it when we base it on what we understand how a person is a person. That division mentality that we have, we separate it. So the idea of God being revealed in the flesh wasn't foreign. Limiting God to one form is what's foreign to Scripture. And Jesus repeatedly claimed divinity. Jesus didn't argue theology, he revealed his identity. When he said, before Abraham was, I am. He didn't say before Abraham was, I was there too, or I was present, or part of God was there, and therefore God's part of me, so I was there. No, he said, I am. That's John 8:59. Why? Because I am wasn't just a phrase. We look in the Old Testament, we see exactly what it is. It's the divine name revealed to Moses. Yes. When Moses said, who shall I say sent me? Exodus 3:14. Jesus also said, I and the Father are one. John 10:30. John 14:9. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. These weren't poetic statements. These were identity claims, and many of them figured it out. In fact, here's the other thing. Thomas said it, and Jesus didn't correct. When Thomas sees the risen Christ, he says, my Lord, my God. John 20:28. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't say, oh, no, I'm not God. How can I be God? I'm just like God. No, he didn't say that. He doesn't even change the subject. He continues to talk to him. He accepts the confession, John 20:29. He accepts it. If Jesus were not God, this would have been a sin. This would have been blasphemy. To accept the claim, this would have been blasphemy. You called me God. I'm not God. Don't do that. No, he accepted the claim, and Jesus did not sin. We know he did not sin. Silence would have been a sin. And Paul repeatedly identifies Jesus as God in his writings. Paul plainly states, in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead boldly. That's Colossians 2:9. And then in Philippians 2:6, Jesus existed in the form of God. Philippians 2:10 and 11, and even Isaiah 45:23. Every knee will bow, every tongue confess Jesus as Lord. And it's not talking about Lord King, capital Lord. Yahweh, the name that was switched in the King James versions instead of Yahweh. They put Lord. This isn't metaphor. These are declarations. Revelation uses it as well. And Jesus declares, I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, and the end. That's Revelation 1:8 and Revelation 22:13. Who else is the beginning and the end? Who created all things? In fact, we even see that. By him, all things were created through him. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. The title originates itself of the beginning and the end from Isaiah 44:6 and Isaiah 48:12 when God is being named. No prophet ever spoke this way. No prophet ever said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Jesus did. No angel ever claimed that either. No angel said, I am the Alpha and Omega. In fact, Scripture is very clear that no angel can be a son of God. Only God declares these things. So, I know this will get a lot of arguments, but this is what I'm just telling you guys to do. And please, I'm begging you, seek the Lord. Don't lean on your own understanding. Understand the amazing sacrifice our Father God did for us. And understanding what a son means and sonship means, it's not just a family member. It is family. It is so much more. Remember that Isaiah 55:8-9 says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor my ways are your ways. Or nor your ways my ways. Understanding that means just because we can't grasp how it works doesn't mean it's not true. And the other thing that's amazing is John, the book of John. Many will try and claim, well, the word's been distorted to say that. It's been distorted. However, the book of John, we have one of the oldest full copies of this, predating the Council of Nicaea. And it says these claims in it in the Greek language. It says these claims in it. And we have these things in our hands to prove it. Not only that, there's more and more archaeological evidence that's saying, hey, they believe this. In fact, it wasn't until much later Armenians came in and said, no, he's not God. He never claimed to be God. And then we get the Muslim religion saying the same thing. Then we get other precepts coming off of that from Christianity even, saying Jesus never said he was God. The language was wrong, but the problem is we still have the stuff to look at. We still have the understanding of how language worked back then, understanding what labels meant, to go in and seek it out for yourself. And that's what I'm saying. Don't take my word for it. Don't listen to other people. Go look for yourself. Find the evidence that we see. Look at the archaeological evidence. Look at the proof we have in the dirt. Look at the people who claim it at their lives. Look at the understanding of ancient culture and tech and teachings back then. Look to the word yourself. Pray to the one who can heal you and save you, and listen to what he says, because God still speaks. Whether people tell you or not, God still speaks. He speaks through his creation. He speaks through you. He will speak to you. He speaks through his word. See, the thing is, Jesus isn't just a created being. He isn't just a messenger or an angel. He isn't just a rabbi or a moral teaching pointing to God. He is God with us. John chapter 1:1, John chapter 1:14. In the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God, and then the Word became flesh. And the question is, it isn't whether we can explain it or understand it perfectly. The question is whether we're willing to let God be bigger than our own limits. As Romans 11:33 points out, we can't shrink or deny his power by saying God wouldn't, God can't. And I really, really hope this helps someone. Seek him. Seek him above all else. God bless and shalom.